World building in video games is sort of an interesting thing because it's a hybrid of art and design. It's really kind of dual classing those two things.
Our main job really is to incorporate narrative with the art and blend the two so that it's seamless.
I think it requires a very steady hand. It requires a lot of patience and a lot of communication because we work with so many different people and so many people have their work culminating in what we do.
We're responsible for taking all the assets that the environment guys make and the lore that the narrative guys produce and use that to craft the world that the player is going to experience.
We've got a really small, cohesive team. It's a very lean team. We have a lot of work on the three of us, but it keeps the quality bar high. We have a really good time working together and collaborating and giving a lot of feedback to each other. So world building is really the fulcrum of a lot of things in the game. It's where a lot of the pieces of the gameplay meet together for the experience of the player.
It's kind of like producing a piece of theater or a movie or a television show or something like that. You've got all these pieces and actors and lighting and everything you have to consider to present a story that you're trying to tell. The difference is with games is our engineers have to build the lights and our artists have to build the set pieces from scratch. You know, they're not going out to Home Depot and buying wood. They're building the wood in a 3D program and then assembling that, and then passing it off to us, like the world builders who are actually set dressing and producing the world.
The world of Reckoning came about from very early brainstorming between concept and the design department and the environment artists and the world builders.
So we start the process usually with concept art. After that, we usually work with environment art to brainstorm ideas of how we want it to look.
We don't make the individual assets. We have an incredibly talented environmental art team that actually does that for us, and we work very closely with them. So they give us those pieces, and then we'll craft the terrain and place all the objects and try to create an organic, living world for the player to run through.
It's really interesting to see that world come to life. I mean, we start with just a flat, level piece of terrain.
In fact, this is probably a good time to actually pull you guys in and let you see some of the tools that we use to make these spaces. Okay, so let's take a quick look at our tools here. We've done some basic terrain sculpting with our brush sets here. I'm going to throw in some textures on top of that, just some rock texture, some dirt underneath that, some different shades of grass that I can throw in. And now I'm actually going to put in a road around this hill that I've created, so I'm changing the palette and then putting in the road texture you can see there. And then I'm going to start putting in dirt around it to give a very weathered feel and just kind of move those textures back and forth until I get what I want. You can see I'm trying to make it have some history to it, that the cobblestone is sort of worn away. And that's a big deal for us, that all these places in the world have a story to them, have history to them. And now I'm just trimming it in with some flowers around the edge of the road just to frame it in nicely visually. We'll extend that road just a little bit further around that. And now I think it's time to place some actual assets in here. So we have our cliffs and our trees and our rocks and all that make this world feel lush, and I'm going to start throwing those in. You can see the big downtarth trees and some smaller trees just to give a different scale to things. So place these rocks around the different parts of the path, lower that down so it's on level with the player, and probably throw in a couple more over here, I think, just to make that feel sort of bookended. And now I'm going to want to throw in some more stuff that's actually a smaller level, just another level of detail that's more close to the player. Here we go, placing these down. And then I'm going to come back in with some terrain brushes and make that feel really seated in the world. And here I'm actually using the vegetation brush to throw in some ferns and some different grasses and get that really lush feeling that you have as you run through the world of Reckoning. We'll add in some flowers that sway in the wind and some more red flowers around the edges of the road just to give some real lushness to things.
Creating a world isn't simply just about placing trees and rocks down, lighting it properly, throwing in some effects for, the extra magic. It's really about the way the narrative blends with the world.
A lot goes back to story. A lot goes back to telling the story of the world, the story of the quest, this journey through the Phalanx and this war that's happening. And that's really exciting because we get to put our hand to a lot of different things, not just the visuals, but the actual deep narrative of this game.
The environment in the world should kind of be like its own character in the game. It has a part to play. It can evoke emotion. It kind of like sets the tone for whatever's happening. It's also reacting to what's going on around it.
My favorite moments are the ones where I get to work closely with narrative and we come up with a little story that may or may not be ever discovered by a player, but I know it's there.
You can run around and find these nooks and crannies where little bits of storytelling are happening, where there's this one NPC who you might find in a little crevice of the world who tells you this great story or asks you to help him with this incredible thing.
everything has a tremendous level of detail applied to it.
From the assets that were made to the way they were placed, nothing was generated. We have taken the time to rotate everything just the right way, place it, and really create the experience for the players.
We have to be very invested not just in the individual stories of what happens in a certain forest and the characters that live in our time, but also the much, much grander epic scale that the Kingdoms of Amalur history takes over. We're making spaces and locations in the game that are going to be used not just in Reckoning, but further on in the MMO when it comes out, so that's really exciting. And that requires a lot of interfacing with the MMO team, and that's really fun because we start making something and playing with it, and then we talk to them and they're like, yeah, that'd be great, let's try using that. And they twist it and bend it, and years later when history has taken its toll on it or changed it or made it better or torn it down, it's really exciting to learn how they've not just developed ideas that we made and made them bigger and grander by the time the MMO happens, but how they've destroyed things that we introduced and how those things are just big craters by the time the MMO player is going to actually see it. And that's really exciting, it's really fun.